Did you know the king of rock and roll was once considered too hot for TV? Can you believe Elvis' hip movements caused national panic? The clean-cut rock star we remember today was actually a rebel who terrified parents across America. Number 8. A Big Hunk O Love, 1959. Was a song about physical attraction really that shocking in the late 50s? You bet it was. When Elvis released A Big Hunk O Love in 1959, many radio stations refused to play it because of its suggestive title and lyrics. The song featured Elvis crooning lines like, "I need your love tonight," and "A big hunk of love will do us right." By today's standards, these lyrics seem completely innocent, but in the buttoned-up 1950s they were enough to raise serious eyebrows. The controversy didn't stop the song from becoming a hit, though. Despite limited radio play in conservative markets, A Big Hunk O Love shot to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. This was Elvis's first number 1 after returning from military service, proving that a little censorship could actually help boost record sales. The song's driving beat and Elvis's energetic performance made it impossible to ignore, even for those who found the lyrics troubling. Fans would call radio stations repeatedly requesting the song, forcing many reluctant DJs to put it on their playlists, despite management concerns. Some stations compromised by playing it only after 9 p.m., treating it like adult content. What makes this censorship particularly amusing is how tame the lyrics actually are. There's nothing explicitly sexual about wanting a big hunk o' love. The innuendo is entirely in the listener's mind. This highlights just how conservative American media was during this era. Elvis wasn't even allowed to be shown from the waist down on some TV appearances because his hip movements were considered too provocative. The song's producer, Sam Phillips, later revealed that they knew exactly what they were doing with the title. "We wanted something that would get people talking," he admitted in a 1970s interview. If they're talking about it, they're buying it. Number 7. One Night, 1958. Would you believe one of Elvis's biggest hits was actually a watered-down version of a much racier song? One Night has an interesting beat code that many casual Elvis fans don't know. The original version was titled One Night of Sin and featured much more explicit lyrics for the time. The original version, written by Dave Bartholomew and Pearl King, included the line, "One night of sin is what I'm now paying for." Elvis actually recorded this original version in January 1957, but his management and record label Sun Records deemed it too controversial for release. This was during a time when Elvis was already facing criticism for corrupting America's youth with his suggestive performances. Not wanting to waste a good melody, Elvis and his team rewrote the lyrics to be more radio-friendly. The modified version changed the opening line to "One night with you is what I'm now praying for." This subtle change from sin to with you and paying for to praying for completely altered the context of the song from regret over a sexual encounter to innocent romantic longing. Despite the lyrical changes, many radio stations still found the song too suggestive. The passionate delivery by Elvis, complete with his trademark vocal inflections and heavy breathing, made it clear to listeners what the song was really about. Some religious groups protested the song, claiming that even the revised version promoted promiscuity among teenagers. What's particularly interesting is that the original One Night of Sin recording was eventually released in the 1980s after Elvis' death. Modern listeners could finally hear what all the fuss was about. comparing the two versions shows just how much Elvis had to self-censor to remain commercially viable in the late 1950s. The controversy didn't hurt the song's popularity, though. One Night reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the UK EMALS chart. It remained one of Elvis's most requested songs throughout his career, with many fans not even realizing they were listening to a sanitized version of a much racier original. Number 6. Baby, Let's Play House, 1955. Can a song about trying to win back an ex-girlfriend really be considered controversial? In 1955, when Elvis released Baby, Let's Play House, the answer was definitely yes. This early Elvis record featured suggestive lyrics that many radio stations found too explicit for their audiences. The most controversial line came when Elvis sang, "I'd rather see you dead, little girl, than to be with another man." This possessive, threatening lyric raised concerns among parents and religious leaders who were already suspicious of this new rock and roll music. In an era when popular music was expected to promote wholesome values, Elvis seemed to be encouraging unhealthy obsession and jealousy. Some radio stations simply refused to play the record. Others would play edited versions, with the controversial line removed. This censorship occurred despite the fact that Elvis didn't even write the song. It was a cover of a blues track by Arthur Gunter. Elvis did, however, add his own twist to the lyrics, making them more personal and some would say more disturbing. What makes Baby, Let's Play House? Particularly notable in Elvis's catalog is that it was one of his first hit records with Sun Records before his move to RCA. The song reached number 5 on the Billboard Country Singles chart, introducing Elvis to a wider audience despite, or perhaps because, of its controversial nature. Music historians now point to this song as an important early example of Elvis pushing boundaries in popular music. The aggressive rockabilly style and emotionally raw lyrics were unlike anything most mainstream listeners had heard before. It represented a significant shift away from the sky-high pop music that dominated radio at the time. Years later, John Lennon would reference the controversial line in the Beatles song, "Run for Your Life," showing the lasting impact of Elvis' early boundary-pushing work. When the Beatles used similar possessive lyrics in the 1960s, they faced much less censorship than Elvis did a decade earlier, demonstrating how he had helped shift cultural norms. Elvis continued to perform Baby, Let's Play House throughout his career, though the song's meaning seemed to evolve as he matured. What started as a threatening possessive plea became more playful in later performances, almost poking fun at his younger, more dramatic self. Number 5. Hound Dog, 1956. Have you ever wondered why a song about a dog caused such a national uproar? Of course, Hound Dog wasn't really about a dog at all. When Elvis performed this song on the Milton Berle Show in June 1956, he caused one of the biggest controversies of his career, and it wasn't just because of the lyrics. During this infamous performance, Elvis slowed down the tempo of Hound Dog and began gyrating his hips in a way that sent teenage girls into screaming fits and parents into absolute panic. The performance was so controversial that it earned Elvis the nickname Elvis the Pelvis in the press. Religious groups condemned him as immoral, and many newspapers ran editorials about the dangers Elvis posed to America's youth. The original Hound Dog was written for blues singer Big Mama Thornton and its lyrics were clearly about a no-good man. When Elvis covered it, the meaning became more ambiguous, but the sexual undertones remained obvious to many listeners. Lines like "You ain't never caught a rabbit" and "You ain't no friend of mine" were interpreted as sexual innuendo by concerned parents. Following the Milton Berle appearance, many radio stations banned Hound Dog from their playlists, despite its enormous popularity. The controversy reached such heights that when Elvis was booked to appear on The Ed Sullivan Show a few months later, the cameras famously only showed him from the waist up during his performance of the song. Ed Sullivan had initially refused to have Elvis on his show, saying, "I won't have this guy on my family program." He changed his mind only after seeing the ratings. Elvis brought to competitor Steve Allen's show. Even then, Sullivan insisted on the waist-up camera restriction, believing Elvis's hip movements were too explicit for television. What's fascinating about the Hound Dog controversy is how it reveals the generation gap of the 1950s. To teenagers, Elvis represented freedom and a break from the strict social codes of their parents' generation. To adults, he represented moral decay and dangerous sexuality. The song itself became almost secondary to what Elvis represented culturally. Despite, or because of the controversy, Hound Dog sold over 10 million copies worldwide and spent 11 weeks at #1 on the charts. The censorship attempts only fueled young people's desire to see and hear more of Elvis, establishing a pattern that would be repeated throughout rock and roll history. Nothing makes music more appealing to young people than adults trying to ban it. 4. Jailhouse Rock. 1957. Is it possible that one of Elvis's most iconic songs contained lyrics too risque for 1957 America? Jailhouse Rock, the title track from Elvis's third movie, found itself under scrutiny for its suggestive lyrics that many radio programmers felt went too far. The most controversial line came in the third verse. Number 47 said to number 3, "You're the cutest jailbird I ever did see. I sure would be delighted with your company. Come on and do the jailhouse rock with me." In an era when homosexuality was not only taboo but illegal in most states, these lyrics about male prisoners flirting with each other raised red flags for many stations. Written by the legendary songwriting team of Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, Jailhouse Rock was intentionally playful and filled with double entendres. The songwriters later admitted they were pushing boundaries with lyrics that could be interpreted in multiple ways. "We were having fun with it," Stoller said in a later interview. "We knew exactly what we were writing." Some radio stations refused to play the song entirely, while others edited out the offending verse. Television performances often required Elvis to change the lyrics or skip that verse altogether. Despite these censorship attempts, the song rocketed to #1 on the Billboard charts and became one of Elvis' signature hits. The movie Jailhouse Rock faced similar scrutiny. Some scenes were considered too provocative, particularly those showing Elvis dancing with female prisoners. Several movie theaters in more conservative areas of the country either edited these scenes or refused to show the film altogether. What's particularly interesting about the Jailhouse Rock controversy is that many young fans didn't even catch the suggestive nature of the lyrics. They were more focused on the driving beat and Elvis's electrifying performance. This generation gap in interpretation was common with early rock and roll. Adults heard dangerous innuendo where teens simply heard exciting music. The song's popularity transcended the controversy. The accompanying dance sequence in the film, with Elvis in his striped prison uniform performing with other inmates, became one of the most iconic moments in music film history. It's regularly cited as one of the first true music videos, predating MTV by decades. Today, Jailhouse Rock is considered a rock and roll standard, covered by countless artists across multiple generations. The controversy over its lyrics seems quaint by modern standards, but it represents an important moment when popular music began challenging social taboos more directly. Number 3, Heartbreak Hotel, 1956. Did you know Elvis' first major hit with RCA Records was initially rejected by many radio stations? Heartbreak Hotel may sound like a blues-inspired classic today, but in 1956, its themes of depression and loneliness were considered too dark for mainstream radio. The song begins with Elvis crooning. "Well, since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street, at Heartbreak Hotel." The gloomy lyrics continue, describing the place where broken-hearted lovers cry away their gloom and where the desk clerks dressed in black. This imagery was a far cry from the upbeat, optimistic songs typically played on radio at the time. Many station managers felt the song's focus on heartbreak and despair was inappropriate for young listeners. Some religious groups even claimed the song promoted suicide with lines like, "I get so lonely I could die." In an America still defined by post-war optimism and prosperity, such bleak themes seemed almost un-American to cultural gatekeepers. The controversy extended beyond radio. When Elvis performed the song on stage, his moody, emotional delivery further alarmed parents. His habit of closing his eyes, swaying to the music, and seemingly losing himself in the performance was interpreted by critics as inappropriate and possibly drug-induced behavior, though Elvis was famously anti-drug at this point in his career. What many didn't realize was that Heartbreak Hotel was inspired by a real suicide note. Songwriter Mick Borenaxton had read a newspaper article about a man who jumped from a hotel window, leaving behind a note that simply said, "I walk a lonely street." This dark origin added fuel to those who wanted the song banned, despite the attempts to limit its airplay. Heartbreak Hotel became Elvis' first #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. It stayed at the top for 8 weeks and became the best-selling single of 1956. The song's massive success demonstrated that audiences were ready for popular music that explored more complex emotional territory. Music historians now point to Heartbreak Hotel as a pivotal moment in rock and roll history. Its blues influences and emotional depth helped establish rock as a serious art form rather than just dance music. The controversy surrounding the song actually helped Elvis's career, cementing his image as a rebellious figure who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. Years later, Elvis would reflect on the impact of Heartbreak Hotel in an interview. "That song changed my life. Nothing was ever the same after that." The same could be said for American popular music, which would never return to the innocent simplicity that preceded this landmark recording. Number 2. In the Ghetto, 1969. Can a song about poverty be too political for mainstream radio? Elvis found out in 1969 when he released In the Ghetto, a haunting narrative about a young man born into poverty who ultimately dies in a cycle of violence. The song represented a major departure for Elvis, tackling social issues in a way he had never done before. Written by Mac Davis, In the Ghetto tells the story of a boy born in the Chicago ghetto to a mother who cries because she can't provide for another child. The lyrics follow this child as he grows up hungry, steals, buys a gun, and is eventually killed, leaving behind his own child to continue the cycle. This unflinching look at poverty and violence was considered too controversial for many radio stations, particularly in the South. The song explicitly addressed racial inequality without naming race. The ghetto setting and social context made it clear to listeners that this was about the African American experience in America's inner cities. Coming just 1 year after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and during ongoing civil rights struggles, the song's message was particularly charged. Some Southern radio stations banned the song outright, claiming it promoted racial unrest. Others would only play it during late-night hours, when fewer listeners were tuned in. Even Elvis' longtime manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had advised against recording the song, fearing it would alienate Elvis's core audience, who expected love songs and rock numbers, not social commentary. Despite the censorship, In the Ghetto reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of Elvis' most significant late career hits. The controversy actually helped boost sales in many markets, as curious listeners sought out the song they'd heard was too controversial for radio. The song represented an important artistic evolution for Elvis. After years of movie soundtracks that many critics considered formulaic, In the Ghetto showed Elvis could be relevant in the socially conscious late 1960s music scene. It was part of his famous 1969 comeback, which re-established him as a serious recording artist after years of decline. What makes the censorship of In the Ghetto particularly notable is that the song doesn't actually propose any political solutions. It simply describes a tragic situation. This suggests that even acknowledging poverty and systemic inequality was considered too radical for segments of late 1960s America. Elvis himself rarely spoke about the political meaning behind the song, preferring to let the lyrics speak for themselves. However, his decision to record it, against the advice of his management, suggests he felt the message was important. It remains one of the few instances where the king of rock and roll used his platform to address social issues directly. Number 1. Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear. 1957. Would you believe a cute song about teddy bears could cause a moral panic? In 1957, Elvis's hit, Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear, was banned by several radio stations and even pulled from some jukeboxes because of its perceived sexual undertones. On the surface, the song seems completely innocent. Elvis wants to be his girlfriend's teddy bear. He sings, "Put a chain around my neck and lead me anywhere. Oh, let me be your teddy bear." To modern ears, this sounds like playful, even childish, romantic banter. But in the tense cultural climate of the 1950s, many adults heard something much more sinister. Conservative critics interpreted the teddy bear imagery as a thinly veiled sexual metaphor. The line about putting a chain around his neck was seen as suggesting bondage or sexual submission. Religious leaders warned that the song promoted deviant sexual behavior disguised as innocent romance. Some parent groups claimed the song was corrupting teenagers by introducing them to adult concepts under the guise of a cute teddy bear metaphor. The BBC in Britain initially restricted airplay of the song, placing it on their restricted play list, which limited when it could be broadcast. In some American communities, particularly in the Deep South, local radio stations faced pressure from church groups to remove the song from their platelins entirely. Elvis seemed genuinely perplexed by this particular controversy. In a rare comment on the censorship, he remarked during a press conference, "It's about a teddy bear. For crying out loud, kids have teddy bears." This highlights the generation gap that existed. Younger listeners took the song at face value, while their parents projected adult themes onto the lyrics. Despite the censorship attempts, "Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear" spent 7 weeks at #1 on the Billboard charts and was one of the biggest-selling singles of 1957. The controversy, as it often did with Elvis songs, only increased its appeal among teenage fans who delighted in embracing music their parents found objectionable. The teddy bear imagery became a significant part of Elvis's iconography. Fans began throwing stuffed bears on stage during his performances, and Elvis memorabilia often featured teddy bear designs. What started as a controversial song element became a beloved symbol associated with the king of rock and roll. Looking back from today's perspective, the controversy over "Let Me Be Your Teddy Bear" seems almost comically overblown. But it perfectly illustrates the cultural tensions of the 1950s, when rock and roll represented a threat to established social norms, and even the most seemingly innocent lyrics could be interpreted as dangerous by those resistant to change. Do we still impose similar moral standards on music today, or have we truly moved beyond the censorship that Elvis faced? Has anything really changed in how we view provocative artists, or do we just draw the line at different places now?